Hey guys, my name is Joshua Alston. I serve as the Baptist Campus Minister at the United States Military Academy up at West Point. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's about 40 miles up the Hudson River from New York City in the lower Hudson Valley of New York. And here I get to serve with cadets that are training to be second lieutenants in the Army. And I've been in this role for, it's my 5th year. Arrived just before COVID, and God's been really faithful through this time. Before that, I was the BCM director in Charleston, South Carolina with the College Charleston and the Citadel. And today I get to serve as part of the Equip team with BCNet, and would love to share with you a little bit about follow-up and why I am so passionate about follow-up and think it is something that is extremely important for a campus ministry to grow and stay active. And it can be easy when we get a bigger group to grow complacent. But I think follow-up is something that we have to do well. With 5 people, 50 people, 500 people, like follow-up has to be something that we have a system that we are committed to doing well, and really think through the importance of it. I'm going to put a couple videos out, get into the nuts and bolts a little bit later about my system and how we do it here at West Point. But first, I want to just talk about the importance of follow-up, and then also just 6 tips, 6 quick tips that I would give for follow-up. And so the importance of follow-up is that we don't know where students are. I might throw in the word cadet. I use those interchangeably. So whenever you hear me say cadet, I mean student. But we don't know where students are when they come into our ministry, whether it's to your large group gathering, whether it's to a small group, whether it's to one of your community outreach events, or a lunch study or international outreach event, or whatever it might be. We don't know where they are when they come to that. Some of them have been invited a lot of them many times by roommates, by friends, by teammates. And for some reason or another, they've been brought to the point where they said, you know what, I'm going to go. Literally how we structure our ministry is all focused on trying to draw students from disconnected, not interested, through community events, through outreach events, building relational equity, to get them to deeper levels of community. And so a big part of that is follow-up, of making sure that whatever that reason is, whether it's loneliness, a desire to be connected with community deeper, whether it's a crisis in their life, a girlfriend that broke up with them, a grandmother that passed away, struggling in school, hardships with roommates, whatever it is, there's usually a number of things that bring people to going, I want to find something. And here they are at your event, and it really is a tragedy if they just pass through and don't feel welcomed and don't have someone to follow up them afterwards. So I could do a whole other thing about hospitality team and talking about how to make that person feel welcome and connected. But really what I want to focus on today is primarily after that event, both during it, but also after it. And so about the whole process of follow-up. So getting their information is so important. It's so important. And that'd be my first of the 6 tips, is just make sure you get their information. I think a lot of times we assume, if they like it, they know where we are, they came to our building or they came to our event, or whoever invited them, if the Spirit leads them, they'll come again, or they'll ask more questions. But it actually puts a lot on them. And I think we need to put more on ourselves, which is to pursue people. I mean, that's how we became followers of Jesus, is the Holy Spirit through the church pursued us in our darkness. And we need to be willing to pursue people as well. So get their information, and I would really encourage you to make it easy and preferably digital. If you've done this for a little while, you know how difficult it is to decipher like Gen Zers handwriting. It's brutal, and the reality is if you get one number wrong or one letter wrong, that information is worthless. And so I always encourage people, have a digital way to do follow-up to get people's information. And so in the second part of this video, I'll talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts and logistics of this sheet and the QR code and all that stuff. But I'd really encourage you to make it really, really easy for them to share their information. And so do that. And so if you do Connect cards or whatever, make sure those are easily accessible, not just the first month, but every month. And that leads me to point number 2, promote follow-up every single week, not just in August. It can be really easy to focus on new cadet outreach or new student outreach, right? In August and in September. But man, it's so important for every single meeting, every single event you put on, I would say, to promote, hey, we'd love for you to fill the info form. Hey, scan that QR code. Hey, fill out that Connect card. Like for that to be a part of it every time. And for us, it's been such a repeated thing that when people bring people, they're like, hey, scan the QR code. And wouldn't even, they're the ones pushing the new students to do that. And so that's a huge part of it. That's something that we've really committed to. And this past January and February, we had, I think it was like 54 first-time visitors in just January and February. And honestly, if we didn't have this follow-up system in place, that's just a part of our rhythms, a lot of people probably would have floated in and floated out without us ever knowing they were there. And so that's a huge thing. Point number 3 would be to make that initial contact within 48 hours of their visit. Within 48 hours of them attending that meeting, I'd really encourage you to have a text in their phone or an email to follow up or something. And so if you've gotten their information to, as they say, right, strike while the iron is hot, it's so important. Again, that feeling of loneliness and frustration or grief over whatever crisis or difficulty they might be going through, all of that can be a season. And so if it takes us 2-3 weeks to follow back up with them, whatever they were wrestling through, they might have found some other way to cope. And ultimately, we know those are all going to be short-term solutions. And so we really want to take advantage of the opportunity that the Holy Spirit's given us with that person. And so I'd really encourage you within 48 hours to have a contact with that person and be already setting up a follow-up meeting. The fourth thing I'd say is don't let silence stop you. They might have just forgotten your text. I mean, I've done that many times. Thankfully, now you can actually, I bet I was asking for it for years to be able to make text messages unread, like emails, right? So they can circle back to it when you can't address it right away. But we've done that all the time. If you're driving or if you're moving around and you open a text or an email and you can't address it right away, and sometimes it can fade. But I feel like for us, it's easy to send that message. If they don't respond, okay, obviously they're not interested. But we don't need to assume that. I think we need to push through the silence, make multiple connections, because sometimes they just miss it. They overlook it, or they're stressed, or they're busy and they think they're going to get to it later and they forget. And so I'd encourage, if you don't hear from them within that 48-hour first contact, to make a second. Or then maybe at that point, you don't want to be the one continuing to follow up, or whoever's assigned, maybe just pass it to someone else to reach out to them as well. And so that can be really important. The fifth thing I'd say is set up a face-to-face meeting whenever possible, and let them know ahead of time that, hey, I'd love to get to know your story and to learn about you. I'd love to share a little bit about us, and let them know ahead of time. Like, would this be like a 45-minute, like to an hour, like a gap in your class period? Would love to sit down with you and talk to you more about it. It could be 30 minutes, it could be less, whatever works best for you guys. But to let them know ahead of time, this is how much time I love in your schedule. Do you have the time? And then to set that up. I know that can seem daunting to be like, wow, every person. And yes, in August, that is overwhelming. When we have 120 new faces or whatever your ministry looks like, there's obviously more at the beginning, and it can feel overwhelming to try to make that happen. And that's why we have a cadet shepherds, about 20 leaders that help be a part of that. But whatever that looks like, to make that a huge priority early on, to make those face-to-face connections. And yeah, it's a big commitment, but I don't regret it. Every time it's such a blessing. If you know about gospel appointments, that's what we kind of do during our follow-up time, is hear their story, share our story, share God's story. And part of that is sharing about our ministry and our vision and our a desire to connect with them. And so that's a big part of it. The sixth and final thing is tailor that follow-up for each student based on the information. Again, I'll get into our specific follow-up form, but I think it's really important to tailor that information. Don't just make it a generic copy and paste that doesn't relate to them or connect to what their feedback that they gave you on their info form. It's really important. Like one little thing is, they give their first and last name, and then they give their preferred name, which I'll mention later, but that's actually really important because we have so many students that don't go by their first name or their last name, but they go by their middle name or a nickname or something. And so making sure the email addresses them by that preferred name, just little details like that actually do make it feel so much more personalized. We know we got those general marketing emails and it calls us Bartholomew, and no one calls us that, right? And so being able to make it personalized, and if they asked about small groups or D groups or worship team, or to be able to be prepared to customize that information that they've requested. If they've asked about, I want to learn more about what Christians believe, to be prepared to talk about that and ask if they have specific questions based on what they have said. So those are just 6 quick tips on follow-up and why I think it's so important. And in the next video, we'll talk a little bit about logistics of what that looks like to do follow-up and the systems we set up. And so I'll see you guys there soon. Thanks.